Hey everyone, how's it going? Thank you for choosing to be here and spend this time with me. This is the start of my hip replacement series, I guess I'm calling it. It's basically just a journal and series of reflections through vlogs and podcast style um, episodes, I guess I'm going to call it. I don't really know what to call it because this is so brand new for me. But I really wanted to have something tangible where I could look back on this moment 10, 15, 20 years from now and be like, wow, I've come so far from where I was to where I am now. And I thought, why not share it with my community, with you all? And I just really feel grateful that you want to share in this moment and this time with me. So thank you for being here. I do not take you and your energy and time lightly or for granted. It means the most to me. So thank you. I brought my handy dandy notebook because for those who know me, know that my memory is not as keen as it once was. So I have just like a series of notes written down to make sure I stay on track throughout the duration of this little series that I'm doing. So I guess briefly what I'll do is talk about dance when I started dancing. I wasn't your typical dancer that danced from two to now. I did, however, start dancing out of my mom's womb. And while it sounds funny hearing that, I always joke about it, but it feels so real for me. Dance has been the first thing that I've ever really connected to, and it's such an integral part of who I am as a person, but it just allows me to feel connected to something greater than myself. It's feels very spiritual for me when I dance and move my body. And so yeah, I have danced from a very young age, but it wasn't your typical like training at a studio and doing all the techniques and that sort of thing. It was more just, hey, I'm passionate about this. I love moving my body, and that's what it is. And so my mom recognized this, obviously, and she did put me in dance when I was two or three. I have a picture somewhere, I'll have to find it. But she put me in dance, and I remember doing and going to the classes for a couple times, and she asked me, like, how do you like it? And I said, it's boring. I don't want to do it anymore. So she took me out. She had no idea that dance was going to be what it is, right? So she was like, well, she doesn't want to do it. I'm not going to force her. And so I kind of ventured into other things. I did gymnastics, ended up breaking my growth plate in my right ankle. I played hockey, I played baseball, competitive as well. I did lacrosse, volleyball, soccer, you name it, I did it. I was a very physically fit, athletic young girl, and I just loved to move my body. I hated sitting still, and that's very much who I am to this day, mind you. Not so much right now with my injury. But yeah, I was moving my body. I was exercising a ton. I was an athlete. And then it wasn't until I was 12 or 13 years old that I actually started dancing. And it was because of Megan Byer. I'll never forget it. I danced at a talent show and I just freestyled my entire solo. I think it was like over 3 minutes. It was to Destiny's Child, I'm a Survivor. And I had like the big crimped hair and like white eye makeup and just like very bold and dramatic. Like, I don't even know who this little girl was, but she was fierce. It was the singing, dancing chef. That's what I always said I was going to be. I was going to be a singer, a dancer, and a chef because I love to perform. I love to cook. I just love to be of service and to provide entertainment for people. So, anyways, here I was dancing on stage, and at the time she wasn't my friend, but we became friends later on. Megan came up to my mom and I and said, hey, does she dance at a studio? What studio is it? And my mom said, no, she doesn't dance at a studio. And she said, she needs to come dance at my studio. And so that's how I started dancing again. I went back to, it was Theater Dance Academy at the time. And then we eventually moved and transitioned to Step with Style, which is a studio here in Oshawa. And I trained grueling hours. I'm talking 30 plus hours a week in dance. I would eat, sleep, breathe, dance. That's it. I think one year I had 19 competitive numbers. Like it was crazy the amount that I was dancing. And I wasn't like your typical dancer, like gets everything the first try, like super flexible. No, I had to really work for that. I was not super flexible. I had to really work my butt off to get the technique because everyone had been dancing since they were like 2 or 3 years old and I quit. So I had missed all this time. But the thing with me is that because I loved it so much and it was such a huge part of who I am, it was easy to work my ass off because it felt aligned for me. And so it really wasn't like a bad thing. I enjoyed it. I actually thrived on busting my ass to get even a smidge better than some of these girls. So, yeah, that was like the fuel to my fire back then. So, yeah, loved dancing, loved all of that. And now I, throughout that time as a young dancer, there were times where I noticed things were different with my body and I wasn't as flexible. It was hard to get certain things. And I remember they had us doing these oversplits. We were doing oversplits for like 4 or 5 times a week. And there's a lot of research that has come out to say and suggest that oversplits are actually not very good for you. It's not a healthy way of training. And yet here we were doing oversplits, having people grab our legs, yank our legs, have them stand on legs. Like the amount of pressure to do these splits was absolutely crazy. And I just remember feeling my hips, like I had so much pain in my hips. And I've always dealt with groin and hip flexor issues and injuries. And so I'm not a stranger to like alternative medicine, massage therapist, massage therapy, sports injury doctors, like you name it. I saw everyone except for physio because my mom never took me to physio or a doctor to check out, my hips and get an x-ray. But I saw this one guy, Paul, shout out to Paul, Hands in Motion. He was phenomenal. He was the absolute best sports injury massage therapist. I saw him twice, sometimes 3 times a week. And it was funny because we'd go in and he'd be like, okay, your legs are really tight. Like my whole body was always tight. I was just always a mess. And he'd just like look at me and he'd like touch and he'd be like, oh, okay, we're going to work on legs today. And then when you come back, we're going to work on upper body. So, okay, cool. We worked on legs. I feel great. I leave. I come back on a Thursday or whenever it was. I think it was Monday and Wednesday. But I come back on that second day and like he would just be so upset. He'd be like, oh, damn it, Jess. He's like, your legs are back to being tight. Like, we can't move on. We have to go back to the legs. So we go back to the legs. And I cried during these sessions. Like, I would be in tears, frantically falling off the table because it hurt so bad. But I always knew that I needed it. It was one of those treatments that I knew by going there, it was going to suck in the moment, like really bad, especially when he worked on my calves, especially when he worked on my groin. But as soon as I left, it was like I had this new body, the second chance. So I was seeing Paul for a great deal of time during my adolescent years when I was training at Step with Style. And so after my adolescent years, I had moved on and I started training and dancing at Vlad's in Richmond Hill. And there I was a part of the company. And then I ended up competing with them for 1 year and like really working my ass off again. It was like back in the grind of it all. And from there, I kind of transitioned into my professional career where I did music videos. I did a lot of like live performances. I danced on the New Year's Eve stage with Alicia Music. And then from there, I worked with Mark Samuels. I was a part of the cast apprentice program, which was facilitated by Danny and Angela at the time. And it was really just this like whirlwind of like, this is it. I'm going to be a dancer. This is my life and this is great. And it was everything I hoped and dreamed of. Still dealing with issues, again, hip flexor, but just never really put 2 and 2 together because I didn't know that there was anything going on with my body. So I just, again, go in that masculine energy, just like job after job after job, training 20, 30, 40 hours a week, working on top of that, just grueling myself. And then I ended up having my second car accident. And that's basically when I had to give up my professional career. And so I had to take a pause on dance. And it was a really dark time for me. I fell into a really dark spiral, which I'm not going to get into here. But sometimes you got to hit rock bottom in order to come back up. I mean, once you hit rock bottom, there's no place but up, right? And that's when I met my now husband. So there's always, silver lining to everything. I feel like if I didn't have that moment and that darkness, I wouldn't have met him, and we wouldn't have the life that we have now. So I'm very fortunate for that. So we met, and then that is when we conceived our first child, Nolan. And we conceived him January 2015. And I had him later that year on September 19th. And this was a grueling labor. And the reason why I want to talk about this labor in particular is because this was like kind of the stepping stone to everything that has evolved. Well, at least the surgeons say it is. I've subluxed my hip in dance before doing partner work. Just little slips, I like to call them. My hip would just slip in and out, especially if I was stretching, or in the morning I'd crack my hip. But with Nolan, it was a lot different. I was in labor. He was my first child. I ended up having an epidural, so I couldn't feel anything. I had my husband on my right leg, and then I had my mom holding my left. And as I'm pushing, I can't feel anything. So I'm just doing what they're telling me to do. And my poor husband is holding my leg, and he said that he felt my leg go like out and in. And he said it was drastic enough that not only he felt it, he saw it in his arms pop out and pop back in. And it was a nightmare. That whole labor was like such an outer body experience. Like, I don't even remember being in my body. I felt like I was hit by a transport truck. I didn't even feel tethered to this world. And I just remember looking at this baby, not even thinking about my hip, because again, I didn't feel it. So I had no idea. He's not telling me, even though he looks like he's about to throw up. And I'm watching this baby like, I have to care for you now. Like, this is it. It was, wow. It was such a unique experience. And I did suffer from postpartum depression with Nolan. So that's a whole other story that we'll get into, not in this series. But, at a later time, Pat told me, like, babe, I want you to know, like, your hip popped out, like it dislocated. And I guess no one caught it. The doctors didn't catch it. He didn't think anything of it. I just assumed maybe it was my like hips giving way to, my baby, for Nolan to pass through. I had no idea it was my first child. So, we didn't really think anything of it. So we just kind of left it and let it be. And so, as the years went on, I had more kids. I had Liam next, and he was born in March of 2018. So after I gave birth to Liam, I was about 3 months postpartum. And I was teaching kids at the time that I was pregnant with him. And I started getting back into dance slowly, because remember, I took that break. I stopped dancing because of my accident, and I wasn't sure if my body was going to be able to sustain something like that. And so, I started teaching dance for these children. And then it got to the point where I thought, you know what, maybe my body is stronger than I realize. And maybe I am healed, and maybe I can go back to dance. So when Liam was born, I joined a company in Toronto, and it was like a training program that like focused on shows. And I believe I was with them for 4 seasons. So that 4 seasons, it was 2 shows a year. So 2 years total. And in that time, we were training immense hours. Like Sundays were the days that we trained. And I was in both the like rec program, I guess you could call it. It's not really rec because it's adults. But I was in like the pre-professional and then like the advanced professional division as well. So I was training from like 10 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. And it was crazy because I would be gone from my family, my 2 kids, my husband, from like 8:39 in the morning, because again, I had to commute to Toronto. I live 45 minutes east of Toronto. And then I would take an hour and a half to come back home because the traffic was just crazy. And so, yeah, I just spent my days for weeks, 12 weeks at a time, 13 weeks at a time doing this, having the show, having a couple weeks off, and then boom, right back into it for the next show. 12, 13 weeks, show, boom, break. And again, and I was doing drop-ins at the time. I was really like, immersing myself back into dance because I thought, fuck, this is my second chance. Like I have a second chance at being a professional dancer and doing what I love. And, I'm very fortunate because, through going back to dance and through doing all of these things, despite some of the hardships, which I will share in depth on another time, it was really beautiful. It was like a second coming of, me as a dancer, as a professional dancer. And again, I got to do music videos, I got to perform. I even did a Canadian and mini European tour with Mel XD at the time, which I'm very thankful for. And it was really exciting just to see, France. We went to Cannes, France, and it was just something that I'll never forget. It was an experience of a lifetime. And, I'm very fortunate that I had that second chance to do something like that. So that was really lovely for me. But yeah, so that's how I kind of got into teaching women, because I was offered a position through this company to teach on behalf of them in my city. So I was teaching women hip hop and heels classes in Oshawa. I did all the networking. Most of the promotion was pre-made, but I was delivering it. And the moment that I did that, I realized like this is what I want to do. And so I worked through them for a little bit, but I realized, I want to do this, but I want to make it better because women deserve better. I deserve better. We all deserve better. So that is how I started branching off into my own thing. And we called it J Force Choreo at the time because it just was like a quick thing. Like I was so eager, I was so enthusiastic about it, and I was young at the time. And so I just jumped into it. And eventually, as time went on and on, the practices deepened. And that's when I had OE. And OE really helped me tap into that feminine energy. He helped me slow down. He helped me see that, the feminine energy is all about reception and not just give, give, give. It's not about giving, it's about receiving. It's about being present. It's about, enjoying and basking in the moment for what it is. And so he really helped framed the evolution of me and the company, which later turned into Essence Movement Studio. And really, it speaks for itself. It's about helping women find their essence through movement, because movement is medicine. And so through that, life was just lifing. Life was just lifing. I had injuries, and like always, injuries just one after the other. And I fought through them. I ended up fracturing my tibial plateau, which is in my knee, hurt my ankle. Like I am a mess, guys. Like messy Jessie nonetheless. My last child, Maeve, is my gift from my mom. I truly believe that. And when I had Maeve, I ended up having a C-section with her. She was very stubborn and she didn't want to come out. So we ended up having to go through a cesarean. And that was really hard for me because surgery, I'm terrified of surgery. And it wasn't what I envisioned for us. I envisioned a natural, unmedicated delivery where we could have skin to skin. And I really wanted to breastfeed this time because I couldn't breastfeed with my other kids. So it was like such an important thing for me. And it felt like it all just got ripped away. And so that was really hard for me to come to terms with, but we did it. And the healing process was a very humbling experience for me. And I'm really glad I wasn't making vlogs of that because I don't even know what I would say because I was in so much pain. It was just it wasn't something I could have fathomed. And I don't know how women go through that time after time. If she was my first child, she would be my only child because I would never have a C-section again in my life. So around 4 to 5 weeks after I gave birth to Maeve, I remember sitting on the edge of my bed to climb in and go to sleep, and I couldn't lift my leg. I had this excruciating, like stabbing feeling in the front of my hip, and I had to physically grab my Christmas jammies nonetheless, grab my leg and pull it up on the bed. And I was like, I turned to my husband and I said, this is not normal. This isn't right. Something's wrong. And I couldn't tell if it was maybe my scar, like the incision, or if it was something else. So, at the time I was really trying to breastfeed with Maeve. So I was taking her to chiro and physio. And I asked the physiotherapist there, like, could it be the scar? Could it be this? So she was doing some exercises with me. And it wasn't until later in January that I started seeing a different physiotherapist for myself, to really focus on the hip, because I knew that this wasn't right. And before I ended up seeing them, I actually had a massage with another incredible massage therapist, Tyler. He's amazing. He's the closest thing to Paul. And so I'm really glad that I found him, because he really just wants to help people heal their injuries and work through them, and not just like give you a fluffy massage. So I remember he worked on me, and I talked about my hip, and we did some glute med exercises, and then he gave me some hip flexor strengthening exercises. So that was really helpful, because at the time we thought maybe it's my hip flexor again, because I've always had issues with it. And so I started doing physio, and I went to physio, y'all, for like, I want to say 6 to 7 months. I went from January to like end of summer, maybe even first week of September. And I just couldn't do it anymore, because I ran out of benefits, and I couldn't pay the $130 twice a week for weeks. So I ended up dropping that. But around the summertime, my physiotherapist and we really discussed, after doing all of the treatments, all the shockwave therapy, all the strengthening and stretching and mobility and ultrasound and taping and all of these things, we really tried it all. Her and I both agreed that, I think it's time to seek help. Seek a second opinion, see what's going on, maybe get an x-ray, ultrasound, MRI would be best. And so I went to my doctor and I said, hey, this is what's been happening, and I really need to get this checked out, because it's getting worse again and I don't know what it is. And so we ended up getting my MRI done around on June 6, 2024. And I'll just read it, because again, this is why I have my notes. There's a lot of information. But basically, I have a labral tear and full detachment. It says predisposed by hip dysplasia. So what hip dysplasia is basically your hip joint looks like so and so. So it's a ball and a socket, and the socket sits over the ball like this, So my hip, however, has a very shallow hip socket. So instead of covering the full ball like this so it can easily rotate in it, it's sitting like this, so it can slip and have impingements at the top and the bottom. So instead of being fully covered, it's like slightly covered. So basically what that means is it's more prone to dislocations and subluxing, which happened in my delivery. And I also had an impingement, and then it said moderate osteoarthritis effusion, which basically means, again, that the narrowing, instead of being spacious like this, it's actually tighter like this, and that's why it's struggling to move. So very, very uncomfortable, not nice whatsoever. Again, x-ray, ultrasound, also, I got that in August, and it showed the same thing: moderate right hip OA effusion and arthropathy. So yeah, that was a big pill to swallow for me. I sobbed, because I didn't really know what it meant. Like, I saw arthritis, and I have family members who are like 60, 70, 80 who have had arthritis. I've never heard of, a 30-year-old having arthritis. And all the research that I looked up wasn't good. And so it was a really hard time for me. So when I met back up with my surgeon, and I had said to her, okay, so I guess now the plan is to meet with a surgeon and just to see, like, get that second opinion. And she said yes. So she asked me, who do you want to see? And I was so taken aback, because I thought in my head she would send me to the best surgeons, because they have those connections. But welcome to Canada, you have to do the work for yourself. So I couldn't think off the top of my head. I wasn't ready to answer that question. So I just said the bone and joint specialist in Ajax, because it rang to me, because my massage therapist had told me about them, and that's who he saw for his shoulder. So anyways, went and saw him, and I wasn't really planning on, paying any mind to him in terms of like surgery. But when he told me that basically this would lead to surgery and a total hip replacement, and that he wouldn't operate on me because I'm too young. And then he started going through some really scary things about, we cut through the back, we do this, we have to fully dislocate your leg. And how we do that is you lay on a bed and we have a metal pole between your legs. We just jam it down. And like all of that really, really traumatized me. And I felt nauseous. I couldn't believe that this was my life. I'm like, this is crazy. I went from being perfectly healthy, dancing through all 4 of my pregnancies, to now all of a sudden after May being perfectly fine afterwards, aside from healing. 4 weeks later, I can't lift my leg and now I have to have surgery. This is absolutely bonkers. I cried. It was the worst car ride home. My husband was with me. And I remember having a member hangout that night, and I really did not want to go because I didn't want to be around anyone, because I was not in a good headspace and my energy was off and I didn't want to bring others down. But I ended up going to see my members. But yeah, it was a heavy day for sure. So after that, I said, you know what? I can cry about this. I can be upset by this, and I can let it take over my whole damn life. Or I can be stronger and smarter than it, and I can research the shit out of it and figure out, okay, what exactly is this? Okay, now what does it mean for my future? Okay, great. What are the surgical options? And so I was in rabbit holes between Reddit, Google, institutions and colleges that have been focusing on new developments in tech and technology with this type of surgery. And I found out that, the anterior approach was the best approach. I even looked through like hip resurfacing and hip arthropathy and like literally everything that you could research, I did. And I realized that, okay, these are the questions that I'm going to need to ask the surgeon. Okay. Is like, what about hip resurfacing? Can I have that? Am I eligible? What's the safety and efficacy of that? Boom. Okay. Those are my questions. Am I going to be able to dance again? Can I perform again? Will I be able to teach again? What is the healing process? Like, there were so many questions in my mind, but at least now I had this idea going into it. I wasn't just like a deer in a headlights. I knew what I needed to ask, who I was going to ask it to. And when I was looking at surgeons, I was very, very specific, because I didn't want the surgeons that did all the knees and elbows and shoulders. I wanted the surgeons that, eat, sleep, and breathe hips. So I was very particular with where and who I wanted. And I only saw the one out of the 4 that I was looking at. But honestly, when I met Dr. Kane on February 25th of 2025, my sister and I both went. I kind of knew that that was going to be the surgeon I was going to go with, just based off my first initial with him. And it was pretty freaky, because that was going to be the day I was supposed to sign my surgical papers. And so we met with him, and the first thing he told me was, you need a new x-ray. And so there we go, get a new x-ray, even though they didn't book me in for one. It was a whole mess, this poor guy. And so I get the x-ray done, and I'm sitting on the bed, and he comes in and he opens up the x-ray on his computer, which is across from me. And instantly I could see like it looked worse than my last one, which was in August. So it was like 6 months ago. And instantly I knew what he was going to say. But the difference with him and the bone and joint specialist is I already knew what he was going to say was that I need a hip replacement, but I knew that he specialized in the anterior approach. So I was already expecting to basically go into surgery if I liked his demeanor and I felt like he was a good, compassionate surgeon. And so we're talking, and, he offered me options. He said, we do have, non-surgical options of, injections. And I respectfully declined. I said, I did my research on them, and there's not enough concrete evidence to support that it'll actually do something substantial. And so I'm not willing to go through a procedure like that, because again, even though it's an injection, it's still a procedure. You need the surgeon present to deliver the injection. You need an ultrasound tech to be doing the ultrasound so that you don't puncture any major arteries, and you need an anesthesiologist there. So why am I going to go through that for a maybe? And it might not even make it better. It might even make it worse. So I just said no. And he said he agreed. He said, I don't think that it's in your best case to do the injections. He said, I don't think it would help you at all. He said, you also don't have enough space really to see a difference. Like, it might just make it worse. And so I agreed. And he basically said, you know, you need a hip replacement. Like, he said, if there was ever a time to do it, he said now would be the time, because you're young, you're healthy, you're fit, you would be able to heal really well, and your muscles are in still like good condition. He said, I'm not telling you this because I need your surgery. He's like, I'm booked up 8 to 10 months from now. He said, I'm telling you this because I can already see it, and I don't want you to get to the point where you're not walking. And this was after we discussed like what I do as a job and career and whatever. And so I started asking my questions. I asked him about the hip resurfacing, and he said, unfortunately, there's not enough evidence and studies done to suggest that it's safe for young patients like myself, because I'm 32. He said if I was a 75-year-old man, he would, but he said with women, it's actually quite dangerous that we're seeing. So we're waiting for more studies to come forward. So he wouldn't suggest that. He said, I would give you a total hip replacement. And we would do it through the front. He explained the whole procedure. I already knew it because, again, I did my research. And then I asked him about dancing and teaching and all of that. And he said, you won't be able to dance at the same capacity that you once did. And you won't be able to perform either. He said, but teaching, you'll be able to teach. You could teach. You could do that. And I cried. I cried because I can't imagine my life without dance, without movement. And, you know, when he said those words to me, it was like, you will never dance again. And that was a hard pill for me to swallow. I know now that he's probably saying it because he has to. He has to be careful with what he says. He doesn't want to give me false hope in case something happens. But yeah, it was a very, very hard time for me. And my sister was with me, and I'm crying. I am a mess, an absolute freaking mess, because all I heard was dance is over. You won't be able to do it anymore. So yeah, that was huge. So I didn't end up signing my papers. I wasn't ready because I had a lot to work through. And so I went up to the reception with this little measly sheet that he gave me, basically scheduling an appointment with him a year later. And I sat down and I handed her the sheet, and she said, did you not sign your papers? Like, and I told her no. He said I wouldn't be able to dance again, and da 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 da. And I started crying again. And she grabbed my hands and she said, I know this is a lot to take in. It's a lot to process. She said, everything you're feeling is valid and normal. But she said, Dr. Kane is amazing, and so is the staff here. You're in great hands. She said, I'm not going to file this because it's basically exactly what you just did a year from now. She said, I'm going to leave this open, and you call us when you want that surgery, and I'll make sure to get you in to sign the papers. And so having her say that to me was kind of reassuring. But I still left, and we left it at that. It was very open-ended, and it was the longest car ride of my life. I had to drive us home, and my sister and I were going back and forth, and I just remember sobbing pretty much the entire time. It felt like my life was over. Like, I hate sounding dramatic, but that is exactly what it felt like. It felt like my life as I know it is over. Everything's going to change. I won't be able to do what I love. I won't be able to, you know, make a difference. And I won't be able to process. You know, for me, dance is more than just like dancing cool. Like, it's not performative for me. For me, it's like, it's the one thing that connects me to my soul and source and God, or whatever you want to call it, whatever you subscribe to. It's the one thing that helps me process and work through and express my emotions, because I've never been good at that ever. It helps me put things that I can't phrase in words into form. And so dance is like a language for me. It is something that I use to tell my story, to share my pain, to express all the things that I've been holding on to that I'm too scared to vocalize. It quite literally gives me my voice, but tenfold. So to take this away from me is crazy. And then it also felt like, well, I never really got big enough as a professional dancer. I never really got big enough in my business. And now it's like my dreams just keep getting taken away from me. So there was a lot of heaviness that I had to process through that. And I'm still processing. As you can see, it's still a lot for me to sit with, but we're here. We're still doing it. So I went back home and I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe I don't need the surgery. I don't need it. I'm going to be fine. I'll just see how long I can go. And sure enough, not even a week later, I was in so much pain because I ended up teaching for 4 hours that week. So I was teaching Tuesday nights for 3, and then actually longer. And then Thursday night, I was teaching for an hour and a half. Plus, I did some extra rehearsals. We were in the midst of show prep. So, and I realized, okay, you know what? I do need this surgery. Like, I was struggling to walk up the stairs. I was limping. I couldn't put socks on. My underwear, I couldn't even put my underwear on. And so I knew, I was like, okay, yeah, we need to call them back. So I called them back. And then I ended up going back in on March 25th of 2025, so a month later. And that is when I saw the fellow who works with my surgeon. And he is actually the one that made me feel a lot better. I had mentioned to him about what Dr. Kane said about the dancing and the, performing and this and that. And he said, I want you to think of your hip as like a car. What happens when you drive your car a lot and long distance? I said, well, wear and tear. He said, exactly. So I want you to think of your hip as that. The more that you put it through and work it and do all these things, so like dancing or performing, it could put a lot of wear and tear on it. And basically, you would need to change out the parts often or more often. But he said, however, we also do this surgery because we want you to get your life back. And so that was really reassuring for me. And so I held on to that hope, and I signed my papers. And so, yeah, the ball is rolling. I had to do blood work. I signed my papers and waited and waited and waited. And I actually have my date now, which is crazy. I'll end it on this, but while I was waiting, this is how the universe works. It's so crazy. So I'm waiting for them to call me, and I knew, okay, I signed my papers on March 25th. They told me 8 months from the time I signed. I'm like, okay, so probably around November 25th is when I'll have my surgery. So I'm waiting and waiting, and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to give his office a call. Like, maybe they just forgot my number, or maybe I can talk to somebody. Nope, it's all automated. Can't talk to anybody. Okay, whatever. Hang up. The next day, midday, around, I think it was like 12, I get a call and it says Dr. Kane, Humber River Hospital. And I was like, oh, speak of the devil, right? And so I answer, and it's his secretary, and she says, hi, yeah, we have a date for you if you're able. And I said, oh, okay, amazing. And she said, it's next week, Thursday. And I nearly vomited in my mouth. I was like, ugh, what? Literally a week. It was Thursday when they called me, and she said that they had an appointment next week, Thursday. I was honest with her, and I said, you know what? I have 4 small children, so that's not going to work for me. So I can't take that date. And it's funny though, because I actually had a friend tell me, who she is psychic or intuitive. I was at an ecstatic dance, and she came up to me and she said, you're going to have your surgery in October. And you know what? It's hilarious, because when she said that, I was like, there's no way I'm going to have it in November. And then they called me and offered me this date, which was in fact in October, and I had to decline it. It's almost like it scared me. Also, a week for a hip replacement, that's crazy, y'all. I have nothing ready. My house is a disaster. I don't got any of the supplies. But needless to say, I told her no. She was very respectful about it. She said, that's fine. I know it's very last minute. And they just called me recently, and now my new date is scheduled for December 11th. So I'm going to be having a total hip replacement. I'm going to have a bionic hip, y'all. So yeah, this is the start of many for this series. So I appreciate you for spending time, and I will see you in many more videos to come. Bye.